Before we begin today's video, I would like to give a shout out to one of our newest subscribers, Shy X. I hope I pronounced that correctly. But thank you for subscribing and welcome to the family. And now on with today's video. Greetings, my dear viewers. It is I, Drayhon, and welcome back to Pathfinder Hero Frame, where we take a look at the different ancestries within Pathfinder 2nd Edition and see what backgrounds and classes best fit with the lore of those ancestries. And today we are once again taking a look at Howl of the Wild, and the third ancestry in that book, the Centaur. I'm sure many of you have been anticipating the Centaur. So let's go ahead and get right into these half-human, half-horse creatures. We have a few heritages from the Centaur. We have Budding Spirit, Fleet Wind, Iron Hoof, Mottle Coat, Pony Gait, and Stout Heart. The Pony Gait seems to be our miniature horses. And oddly enough, speaking of horses, centaurs love all animals except for horses. They find them weird, to say the least. They just see part of the horse, and when they actually see the horse in full, they are disappointed that it's not another centaur. So, yeah. Anywho, for our backgrounds, I would say that there are plenty of backgrounds that are implied in the lore. Like, right off the bat, we can already see warrior, teacher, hunter, nomad. There are nomadic people. Astrologer, they like looking at the stars. They travel a lot, so the circuit judge would work. But let's go ahead and go through each one of these. We have Animal Whisperer, Anti-Tech Activist, Astrological Augur, Circuit Judge, Curandero, Dendrologist, Feybound, Fight Breaker, Free Spirit, Herbalist, Hunter, Laborer, Merchant, Nomad, Northland Forager, Plant Whisperer, Raised by Belief, Scholar, Scout, Spotter, Star Watcher, Teacher, Trailblazer, Wandering Preacher, Wanderlust, Warrior, and Wildwood Local are the backgrounds that I find to be the most appropriate for a centaur. Half of these, like I mentioned, are sort of implied within the lore of this ancestry. For classes, I think that the Barbarian, Druid, Fighter, Magus, Monk, Ranger, Rogue, and Swashbuckler would actually work. Less so on the Rogue. I couldn't find too many that would work, but we'll get more into that later. For now, let's go ahead and take a closer look at these classes and see what we can find with the Centaur. And before we actually get into that, there was something that I found interesting. One of the art pieces for the Centaur had the feel of Native American tribes from our own American history. And I thought that was just a neat coincidence. But then when I started looking into the lore of this ancestry, it seemed more and more likely that the Centaur was connected to the traditions of these tribes. So it would probably be an idea to base a Centaur around the traditions of these Native American tribes. You'll probably have to look up the information for yourself, as I don't know much about the tribes. I just know about what I was taught in school, which was next to nothing. No, seriously, 6 months is not enough time to learn information about something before you go back to repeating the same material for the umpteenth time in the row. One reason why I hated school so much. Anyway, let's go ahead and get right into things. Starting things off with the Alchemist, probably the least likely class to take up as a Centaur, but I feel it was necessary to mention since we do have a couple of healers. So for some research fields for a Alchemist Centaur, I would recommend the Chirurgeon and the Toxicologist. I'm sure the Chirurgeon is going to be the most common research field for any ancestry, but the Toxicologist definitely could work sometimes. Centaurs do think that using unfair hunting tactics, such as poisons, is not very good for the environment. But considering that there are other ways of using toxins, I think it would be a fair research field for the Centaur to take on. Especially if they are in a fight against a opposing force. Moving on to the Barbarian, of course, the instinct of the animal is probably going to be the most popular, but I think the instinct of the spirit is going to be more common in universe for the Centaur. Like I mentioned earlier with the Native American tribes, the instinct of the spirit would actually work with a character of that nature. Moving on to the Bard, we have the Maestro, the Warrior, and the Zoophonia. I actually have to correct myself from my last video because the book had both Zoophonia as the name of the muse and Zoophonic as the name of the Bard. I mean, they literally have a C in the same line as they have an A. So you can understand my original confusion in that last video where I said it was Zoophonic as the muse, when in reality that is just how it is used for the Bard itself and not the muse, which uses an A on the very next page. Moving on to the Champion. Not going to be as common as a fighter, but I thought I would still mention it. The Paladin and Liberator causes seem to be the closest we have to a Champion Centaur, as we can see within the lore that we have. More often than not, we'll probably have a Liberator Centaur, but I thought that Paladin would also work. Moving on to Cleric, we have some gods that are listed, so I thought I would go ahead and go over them real quick. We have a deity based off Celtic mythology known as Cernunnos, the Horned Lord, which is one of the Imperial Lords. Next is Aristeel. Of course, these are centaurs, they're of nature, there's going to be some hunting involved, so it does make sense that the deity Old Deadeye would make an appearance here. Next is Gozre, the wind and the waves. Once again, this is a nature deity, so it makes perfect sense. Moving on to Desna, the goddess of travel. The only reason why that she is listed, because the centaurs are a nomadic race. They are a nomadic tribe. They travel, so it makes sense that Desna, the goddess of travel, would be a deity they would sometimes worship. Next is Omon Hill, or the Balm Bringer, said to be one of the Mammoth Lord gods. Maybe I should have put Mammoth Speaker. Oh well. Anyway, yeah, another god that is listed. Next is Pharasma. An odd one to be sure, but we are talking about one of the biggest deities within Pathfinder universe. So it would make sense that there would be some followers here and there. Next is Kurgis, the strong man. We are talking about a race who were inspired by Greek mythos, who would teach heroes how to be heroes. So it would make sense that a deity of strength would be served by this ancestry. And then we have Gorum. Not a common god to be sure, but definitely one that was listed, and I think it does make sense. Every so often there will be a time where centaurs will need to take up arms against their foes, so having our lord in iron definitely makes sense for an option. Moving on to the druid. There are two different types of faiths that the centaurs follow. The green faith and faith speakers. The faith speakers are the clerics, while the green faith are our druids. And thus the druidic orders that I think would tie into a centaur rather well are those of the animal, leaf, and untamed. Though I think leaf and untamed are going to be more common than the druidic order of the animal. Moving on to the Magus, the only two hybrid studies that I thought fit well with the lore of the Centaur were the Starlit Span to go with the Reading the Stars, and then Twisting Tree for those Green Faith followers. Moving on to the Oracle. Not a common class for sure, but I thought it was a good one to mention, since this is very similar to the Cleric, and some of these mysteries do actually name drop some of the deities that we talked about earlier. The mysteries that I have listed here are the Ancestors, Battle, Bones, Cosmos, and Life. I think the mystery of the Ancestors is going to be the more common oracle type to go with, once again tying back to that Native American connection that I talked about at the beginning of this video. Next is Sorcerer, with the bloodlines of the Fae and the Imperial, tying into those sort of Celtic origins. Next is the Swashbuckler. The style of the Braggart, Fencer, and Wit are probably going to be the swashbucklers that are going to be the most common. Next is the Witch, with the patron fee of the Wilding Steward. Probably the only witch that would make sense here. I'm sure that you could find a reasonable explanation for your centaur taking up another patron theme, but the Wilding Steward was the closest to the centaur lore that I can find. And finally, we have Wizard, with the arcane schools of Civic Wizardry and Unified Magical Theory. This isn't the first time Civic Wizardry has come up, and it is given the same reason in the Centaur lore as the last time we talked about it. The Centaurs are willing to teach anyone. So being able to share magical knowledge does make perfect sense for a Centaur and for the arcane school of civic wizardry. And I just realized that I listed Rogue at the beginning of this video, but I never actually went over Rogue. The Racket of... I want to say the Eldritch Trickster and the Mastermind would work rather well. Though I think the Thief might work as well, though not that well. Anywho, sorry for anyone looking forward to a Rogue. I could not remember what I was thinking about putting down for that class. But that is all we have for today's video. What did you think about the Centaur? Let me know in the comment section below, and tell me what type of character you would create with this ancestry. With that being said, this has been Drahon, and I am offline.